Dr. Mark Pitstick. Welcome back to the course, Greater Reality Living. This topic is Internalize the Great News. Realize all the ways that life is really set up. It's wonderful news. But in this topic, we're talking about addressing the blocks, the wounds, the fears, the misinformation that keep you from really getting that, from believing that, from understanding that, because that then shapes the way you live. So we talked about the category of wounds, including abuse, judgment that you receive, disappointments. Well, now we're talking about deep grief, which is just part of the human experience, of course, and then solutions for that. So that doesn't keep you from realizing the nature of reality and enjoying this wonderful adventure that this earthly experience is. So first of all, deep grief can be initial, if it's very recent for you. And by the way, I'll limit my remarks on this topic to grief about a person or pet who changes worlds. So we're talking about post-material, those who used to live on Earth and now living in another phase of life. And by the way, talking about pets and handling that after they pass on and even enjoying a continuing relationship with them, see article number 22. Another form or another aspect of deep grief can be those who never get over it. So it's lasting or unresolved. And there are some reasons for that, and there are some solutions for that. Or those who have very severe grief for whatever reason. Now, deep grief can also be associated with perceived losses, disability, loss of health, or loss of functioning, financial loss, emotional or relationship breakups, broken dreams, aging, bodily changes, and so on. So there are a lot of things that can cause grief. And by the way, I see perceived losses because you really realize all those are connected to who you think you are, this physical body, and thinking this earthly experience is the only thing there is, and that it's random and chaotic and cruel, when in fact, when you identify more strongly with your true self and realize how life is set up, you don't see those as losses as much as changes, temporary situations, and whatever they are, you can deal with them. And you can find the blessings, the silver linings to them. So I'm going to discuss, because these are so intertwined, I'm going to discuss the causes and the solutions for deep grief at the same time. Of course, remember the general solutions we talked about at the beginning of this topic. First of all, a cause of deep grief is the belief that death is the end of life. A lot of people believe that, again, consciously or unconsciously. I mean, let's face it, if you only trust your five senses for a report about the nature of reality, then it seems quite convincing that death is an end. A person's alive and talking, and all of a sudden, they're not. And that's why it's so important to remember that your five senses report much less than 1% of reality. So some of the treatments, first of all, learn the evidence. We talked about the evidence for the great news, including that life continues after bodily death, and the articles that present this evidence. Number 1, it's sole proof about the scientific evidence. Number 60 for the clinical, and 115 for the experiential evidence that is based on first-hand experience. I discussed this in my small book, The Afterlife Evidence, and also Dr. Schwartz and I presented it in our book, Greater Reality Living. Next, learn that about soulmates, about that concept, and this will help you when loved ones, again, people or pets, pass on. So I discussed that in article number 121. Also, there's much to learn about soulmates in the life between lives topic, and I discussed that in article number 98. Another common cause of deep grief is the belief that there's a fiery eternal hell for you and or your loved ones, or perhaps better, a cessation of consciousness. So you realize there are still, quote, churches teaching this, that if you don't believe a certain way, if you don't do certain things, your life will end, that's it, or you'll suffer for eternity. Either way is horrible. And some people will refute that intellectually, but if they were exposed to those teachings, especially as a child, those can run very deep. Again, how do I know? Hello, I worked with people for over 50 years, tens and tens of thousands of them in all sorts of different settings. So I know how people are. I know what affects them. So some treatments for that. First of all, learn what, quote, hell really is. And I discuss that in article number 14, and we'll discuss it more fully in topic number 7. But basically, it's not a place. There's no fiery, eternal place of torment. It's how you feel when you review what you did to others, like the life review that people who have a near-death experience report. And several thousand years ago, this was known, and the Aramaic language described it. So heaven's how you feel when you did mostly good, when you see and feel what you did to others, and hell is the reverse of that, the contrary. So neither one are permanent places. It's a moment-to-moment state of consciousness, state of awareness, closeness to or distance from source, good, God, love. So I have so many stories I could tell about this, and again, how it impacts people. I'll just share one. I had a family come in for adjustments years ago, and the daughter, who was about 30 years old at the time, obviously was upset, and she was very anxious and had been crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Well, I'm worried about my dad. He's having some heart problems, but he isn't a Christian. He hasn't been saved. So I'm worried that he might die and go to hell forever." And I thought, oh, wow, you realize you're in hell. I didn't say this. You realize you're experiencing hellish emotions right now because of your belief in this blasphemous concept that a loving God would even envision something like that, let alone create it. But I didn't say that. And then next, the dad came in, and I said, "Well, how you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm getting a lot of pressure from my daughter and my wife to get saved." He said, "They're afraid I'm going to die, and they're worried about my soul." So I was seeing these people once a month. So a month later, the daughter comes in first. "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm good. Dad was saved in church, and I'm so relieved. So now we don't have to worry about him. I know I'll see him in heaven someday." And then the dad comes in. "How you doing?" "Oh, you probably heard I was saved." Right? I said, "Yeah, I heard." And he said, "I didn't really. I just kind of did it to get him off my back." So that, I mean, that's comedic material, but it just shows you the kinds of needless fears and worries and baloney humans go through because of these archaic and erroneous teachings. And another, when I was about 16, my paternal grandfather passed. They were of a certain religion, and so at the funeral, the minister passed around a plate, and my relatives, none who had that much money, I mean, this is back in the 60s, they were putting $20 bills in there left and right. And I said, "Hey," I leaned over and said, "Hey, Dad, what's this about? Why is everybody loading up their offering plate with money?" And they said, "Well, your grandpa didn't go to church some, so there's concern that he may go to hell or purgatory. So the minister will pray his soul out of hell and purgatory um, because of these offerings. And I thought, wow. I thought of who's the P.J. Barnum. There's a sucker born every minute. I'm like, wow, whoever thought that up was really smart. I mean, think about a money maker scheme. So anyway, there's just some stories to help you if you're still affected by that. There are societally influenced beliefs about what is normal after a loved one passed that can cause deep grief. For example, I know when I grew up, it was like when people had a child who passed, it's like, say, well, what's wrong with them? Oh, they had a child who, they would say die. I don't say that because the child didn't die, just his body did. Oh, their child died 20 years ago and they never recovered. And part of that is just a societal belief. That's the way you're supposed to act when a child passes. Now, with this Helping Parents Heal organization, we have, I think, 80,000 members now. And again, some of the most peaceful, joyful, loving, serving people you'd ever met, not despite, but because of the passing of the child, because they recognized that their child's passing was a spiritual wake-up call for them that helped them remember the great news that we're talking about. I hope you get this, because this is so important and so fundamental in turning around and having this wonderful earthly experience. So treatment for that, watch these interviews I mentioned of the Shining Light parents. Use the, what we call, ART technique, which stands for Appreciate, Realize, and Transform. I discussed this in article number 41, and there's an audio for it. But basically, for example, when a loved one passes, instead of being deeply grieving forever, you can appreciate the time you had together, appreciate all the wonderful memories and moments, all the love. Next, you can remember that you'll see each other again. Life and love are eternal. And then the T stands for transform. You can transmute that sadness. You can transform for the better because of knowing this loved one, because of that relationship. So the ART technique, very powerful. Another cause of deep grief is if you have limited or no relationships. And you would be understandably lonely. I mean, it's amazing how many people are so isolated. And so some of the treatments, expand your circle of kindred spirits. I talk about in article number 66 how to expand relationships, especially for more evolved people. Get a pet, one or more pet. Serve others, like the honeydew dude we mentioned in a previous video. And another thing is, remember that you're never really alone. And one of the most amazing experiences I ever had that to help you remember that is this. This is 2007 now, and my dad was nearing passing on. And my partner, Andrea, is an amazing evidential medium. And when we saw Dad about 2 weeks before he passed, I was in the hospital, and she said, Mark, there was a woman in his room, and I think she was there to help him pass on. And at the time, we thought he was going to be fine. He was just having some heart problem and needed to be on medication. He'd live many years more. He was almost 80, but very fit until that time. And I said, no way, he's going to be fine. The doctors just think it's a temporary thing. She said, no, he was there to help him move on, to change wills, to return home. Like, oh, I didn't want to hear that. But indeed, a couple years later, all the lab work came in and so on. They say he had terminal acute leukemia, and they gave him just a few months to live. And so then we went to the house where he was then under hospice care, and she walked in and I said, do you see this woman? And she described, yep, the same woman who's here. And I said, others? Yeah, this quiet man standing in the corner. And so Dad and I were very close, and with Mom we talked about all sorts of things, reincarnation and afterlife. And so I decided just talking about it aloud. And my children were there, and son-in-law and some others. And so I said, Dad, well, Andy is seeing this woman, and described what she looked like. And Andy was picking up from her, said, ask him about the ice box. And Dad said, oh my God, that's my grandma Agnes. You described exactly how she is, and said ice box. I hadn't thought of that for many years. But when we were kids, Grandma had an ice box. And if any of my brothers got into that, she'd switch them. But I was her favorite, so I could get in there and get some food. And he laughed about it and was telling stories. It was a wonderful thing. So a little bit later, I said, Tandy, are there others around? And she said, the room is full with beings, post-material persons, his family and friends who were there to help escort him home, animals, because Dad was a big nature lover, always doing things for animals, angels, guides. She said the room is full of help, here to help him. So 2 days later, he was in a hospice center because he was really close to passing. And there was a little courtyard outside the room, a little wooded area. And I said, how about now? Are you seeing many spiritual beings around? And she looked around, and she has a certain look when she does this, and she said, innumerable, too many to count. She said there are just hundreds and hundreds of beings here. Because my dad was a great guy. He helped a lot of people in his life. And so that's one that helps me always remember, and I can pass on to you. Even though you seem like you're alone, you have your angels, guides, master teachers, soulmates around you. But of course, it's better or good to have also human and pet dear ones as well. And you can develop that. It's just a matter of getting out and doing some of the things I mentioned, service projects, or going to spiritual centers. And again, see article number 66, where I talk about places where people frequent, where you can meet other people who are more on that same wavelength. Another cause of deep grieving is lacking knowledge that you can have contact with your post-material loved ones now. It's been proven scientifically. Many people have had these through evidential medium sessions, which I describe in article number 6. And they have what I call afterlife contacts, where while awake or dreaming, they will have sensations of their loved ones being present. And I created a technique, of course, an audio program called the facilitated afterlife contact technique, where, of course, under deep relaxation, guided imagery, you can quiet your brain. Again, remember, when the brain's running the show, it thinks it knows what's what, but it's only getting less than 1% of the big picture. So it's telling you wrong. So you can quiet your brain, then you can perceive what's always been there right around you. So I talk about that technique in article number 9. You can also learn more about about afterlife contacts in article number 28, and then develop with this information. And with practice, it's like developing any other relationship, a different type of, but very meaningful, very real relationship with your loved ones who have changed worlds. And of course, you can see them more fully when your body perishes. Another cause of deep grief is believing that loved ones were taken too soon. And it's understandable, especially when it's children or younger people. But you have to remember that no matter what they look like outwardly, a cute little 3-year-old girl, she's an eternal soul, and she might be more advanced than you. So you have to look beyond the outward appearances. So that's a big one. Another thing to know is that multiple mediums and teachers, for example, Mavis Patilla, who is my partner Andrea's teacher, say that timing of people passing on is known in, quote, spirit world, the really real place, around 4 to 6 weeks before the person's body dies. And when you learn that, you're just like, hello, what is going on here? So were they taken too soon, or was it exact timing for that soul to return home? They graduated from Earth School, their time on Earth was over, they fulfilled their missions here. And so while on one side, we'd like everybody to live to 105 years old and pass in their sleep, that's not the way life is set up. Some of the most advanced souls may be stillborn or live a couple years or 10 or 20 years. They make a huge impact, and then they move on to the next part of life, again, remembering that those connections are eternal connections. So I'll just share a couple stories that I learned from these interviews with Shining Light parents that lend more evidence to this, that there is a timing. One mom told about her little daughter who at a young age, 4, saw angels, and she had names for them, and the angels were a big part of her life. Well, over the years, the little girl didn't talk about them as much, and the mom thought, well, maybe she didn't see them any. 30 years later, the daughter, now 35 years old, said, Mom, remember when I used to see angels when I was a little girl? She said, they're back now. And 2 weeks later, the woman, the daughter, passed on in her sleep from an unidentified heart condition. It's like, okay, that's interesting timing. Another is a son who was a good young man, but usually not very demonstrative. And one day he was getting ready to leave and said goodbye to his dad. And then he turned around and came up to his dad and said, Dad, I really love you. And the dad said, I love you too. And the son said, no, I mean, I really love you. And took his hand, his face and his hand like that, and gave him a hug. And an hour later, the son had passed on in a car wreck. Again, the soul knew the timing, but then the human body, that the human body was ready to pass on. And the last one, again, about a 5-year-old girl who was asked in her church, Presbyterian church, to draw heaven. So she drew 3 things and brought them home, and her mom said, what's this? And the little girl said, this is the place of planning, where you plan where you're going to live. And so, okay, what's the next picture that you drew? This is where you plan who your parents are going to be when you come to Earth. This little girl hadn't been exposed to any teachings like this. And then the third drawing, this is the book of life. You can't open this till after you die. And the mom was like, wow, where is she getting these things? Nobody taught them to her. Then around age 12, the girl said to her mom, Mom, I'm kind of worried about dying. What's it like? Tell me about death. And the mom said, well, don't you remember? You used to tell me about it when you were 5. You knew all these things. And the girl said, no, I don't remember. 2 weeks later, the little girl had a arteriovenous malformation in her brain, rupture, and dropped dead. Her body dropped dead. And so again, when you hear stories, and there are many like this, you get a sense that there really is a timing, a meaning behind this that escapes a more superficial and limited examination of it. That's enough for this video. We'll resume in video number 5 for topic number 4, Internalize the Great News. See you there. Let it shine.